Okay, so this should be our last video when it comes to finally diving into the Phalanx Covenant storyline. So hopefully tomorrow you guys should have a video out there beginning our coverage over that crossover because I really want to go ahead and get into Legion Quest, but also get into Age of Apocalypse and Onslaught as well. But before we can do that, we got to sit down and talk about the Phalanx Covenant storyline. But before that, we got to talk about Excalibur issue number 81. Now, there's nothing really special about this issue, but it's kind of a good idea to kind of wrap up some loose ends and get us ready for the next crossover if you are a Excalibur fan. And so getting into the opening pages for today's storyline, we do pick up with Brian Braddock and also Megan. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, when it came to Brian, he was no longer calling himself Captain Britain. Instead, he was calling himself Britannic. And here's the reason why. Because you see, for a short period of time for Brian Braddock, he was lost in time, literally traveling from the end of time to the beginning of time, just going back and forth, back and forth. Now, while being lost in time, you did have Rachel Summers being able to bring him back into the main Marvel universe. Now, when that happened, we lost Rachel Summers. It did seem like at first she would go back to her time, which was the Days of Future Past timeline. But unfortunately, that did not happen. Instead, she was sent into the far future. As a matter of fact, we did a video called X-Men Phoenix 99. That whole storyline right there explained what happened to Rachel as she went into the far future to begin her moment of being the mother of Scotty to train Cable. But either way, when it comes to Brian, is him trying to explain what he saw when he was lost in time. The whole idea that he saw the birth of so many different stars and universes and galaxies and all these different things. But he also saw planets die when their sun had died. He saw so many tragic but also beautiful things being lost in time. And for Megan, it's really her trying to get a better idea of what her man had gone through while being lost in time. Now, this is also kind of like a prelude to the Phalanx Covenant storyline. And here's the reason why, because we pick up with Kitty Pryde and also Douglock. Now, we don't have the complete origin of Douglock just yet, but also the Phalanx just yet. That will come many books down the road when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. But at this point in time, when it comes to the Phalanx, all we know is that you have different human beings being turned into techno-organic beings as a way to hunt down the mutant race. Now, currently, they're being led by a character known as Stephen Lang. Now, Stephen Lang was somebody in the past who had also worked on Sentinels as a way to kind of hunt down mutants. Now, we thought he was long and gone, but apparently he popped back up, and now he's the leader or supposed leader of the whole Phalanx. Now, if you're part of the Phalanx Covenant, that means you're part of the hive mind. Now, for Douglock, he was a Phalanx, but a tad bit different, and let me explain. You see, most other Phalanx are human beings who were turned into techno-organic beings, better known as Phalanx. But when it came to Douglock, he was created with the dead cells of Warlock and also Douglas Ramsey, better known as Cypher. Now, Cypher died all the way back in Fall of the Mutants. As a matter of fact, we had covered that storyline, and for me personally, the New Mutants had a true, big moment right there in that storyline. It really did change the whole idea of that team going through the idea of losing one of their own. But either way, Doug died in that storyline. What the Phalanx did was they took the dead cells of Doug and also Warlock and combined the two together. Now, if you're part of the Phalanx Covenant, you're part of the hive mind. The difference is that for Doug, he is a mutant, not a human. And so he was able to break free from the hive mind, but also with the help of Zero, an android from the far future. And so ever since he was able to break free and also being able to meet up with Excalibur, you now have Kitty Pryde trying her best to kind of work with Doug, or Douglock, sorry. because to her, she wants to see how much of Doug Ramsey is truly inside of Douglock. Now, honestly, there's nothing in there really of him. It's just a phalanx or a cyborg trying its best to understand how the world works, but at the same time trying its best to understand why Kitty Pryde is pushing this agenda of Douglock trying to remember anything that Doug did in his past leading up to his death. But either way, after a while, she kind of realized that there's no possibility that Douglock could remember anything from Doug nor Warlock's life, and so she runs away upset. But then you have the waitress say, "Oh, it looks like you're now alone, sir." And when he hears the word alone, that word right there begins to kind of help understand what Kitty Pryde is going through. But now we have to jump over to Moira Mactaggert and also Charles Xavier. Now, for me, this is really important because you are talking about the idea of Moira Mactaggert possibly dying from the legacy virus. Now, as you all know, the legacy virus was a virus that was released into the world to kill off the mutant race by strife. But here's the thing. By this point in time, Marvel Comics, we had no idea that Moira was a mutant, that she was just a regular human, and that was it. And so with her now getting the virus, it's kind of like, no, this is very scary. You are now talking about the idea of this virus being able to kill off both mutants and humans at a very fast rate. Now for Charles Xavier, his goal is kind of give her a day off, a day to relax. But also it's kind of like, hey, these two characters might be able to rekindle their love for one another. And matter of fact, you have Charles just completely messed up here. Like, this man is trying his best to give her a day off, but also show her a lot of love. He's all like, hey, get in the jet. We're going to Paris right now. Let's go. And the thing is, he also planned to go over to a very fancy restaurant, but did not think of the idea of, oh, we might need some clothes to wear that look somewhat, fancy enough to get us inside the place. I may have or may not messed up here. And she's freaking out because she's all like, how dare you bring us back to our first restaurant knowing how fancy it is and how we must look to get inside. Now, I want to jump back over to Brian and also Megan, because for Brian Braddock here, he's having a hard time kind of understanding what happened in his life already and what has not happened in his life already. And what I mean by that is you have Megan and also Brian at the lighthouse. Now, the lighthouse was the old base of Excalibur in the early days when it came to Chris Claremont, when he was writing the book. But the thing is, they left the lighthouse a while back, and now they're at Muir Island at the lab of Moira Mactaggert. But for Brian, he still believes that Excalibur is going to move into the place. And it's Megan saying, we already did that. But again, he was lost in time, and he has saw so many different things that truthfully, he has a hard time remembering what he saw, but also what already happened in his past. Now for Megan, she believes the best way to help out Brian is to tell her everything he saw in the timeline, or also what could happen on Earth down the road. But as Brian's saying, she does not understand because when he was lost in time, it wasn't like, okay, cool, he's lost in time, but he can at least still focus on Earth and that would be it. But no, he saw everything that was happening across the entire universe. And so it's kind of like, hey, you know what? I want you to just focus on one piece of information, but then been given like thousands and thousands of other pieces of information. It's so hard to just focus on one piece when you have like 15,000 pieces to also look at the same time. And so it's him saying, unfortunately, when I was lost in time, I could not focus on Earth at all. And so honestly, I cannot tell you what could happen down the road. Now we do jump back over to Kitty Pryde. Now when we do, it's really more just Kitty Pryde just beating up on some college kids. That may sound bad, but like these guys were being rude to someone who was homeless and trying his best to just make some money. And they hate the idea that he's doing that on their campus grounds. And so you had the two boys trying to beat him up. Now, luckily, you have Kitty Pryde step in, and she does use her powers, but also her fighting skills to get rid of the boys. Really, she knocked one out, and the other one just runs away scared. But either way, she kind of realized that maybe she went too far when it came to handling these boys. But at the same time, she realized that she may be worked up because what's going on with Douglock. Now, for me, the last few pages of this storyline is really more of just focusing on love. The whole idea of two people being able to come together to overcome their situations. Because when we jump back over to Charles Xavier and Moira Mactaggert, Charles was able to use his powers to trick the minds of the people of the restaurant to allow him and Moira Mactaggert in. And they are able to have some alone time with one another. And it really shows they enjoyed that time together. Now, for me, it's kind of like Charles saying, hey, listen, Moira Mactaggert, I still got some hard feelings for you. Even though I got a girlfriend in space right now, my mind's on you. But again, it kind of shows that for Charles, he wants to be there in her corner as she goes through the whole idea of the legacy virus. And for Kitty Pryde and Douglock, for me personally, it's kind of like Douglock telling Kitty Pryde that she has to understand that he's still learning, because when his life started, technically it was part of being the hive mind of the Phalanx. It wasn't until Zero was able to help him escape the hive mind of the Phalanx. And when that happened, it was kind of like, okay, here I am. Now I have to learn what I am, who I am, and where I belong. Yes, I may look like Doug Ramsey, but in reality, I am not Doug Ramsey. I was built after him or based off his dead cells. And so it's him saying, Kitty, this is the first time I truly felt alone, because Zero was like me, also trying to understand what he was or who he could be in this world. When he died, it's kind of like, oh, there he goes. That one person who was just like me is now gone. And so now it's me having to learn by myself, technically. Yes, I have you, but like, you're not like me. Now for Kitty Pryde, it's her kind of realizing what he is saying. And she understands that he needs to learn. And so she wants him to stay with Excalibur to continue to learn, but to also figure out if there is any Doug Ramsey left inside of him. And the last two pages are really more of, hey, what if things were different for Charles Xavier and Moira Mactaggert? And the reason why I'm saying that, because you have her say that it was Charles trying to reach her goals, or reach his goals, that scared her away. And she kind of wonders, like, what if they were not trying to chase after his goals? What if they were able to just be themselves, be together, and be that power couple? What kind of lives could they had together? But it's Charles saying that he realized for him to be able to reach that dream, he had to understand sometimes you're gonna have to sacrifice things to be able to reach that dream. And so it's him saying, like, unfortunately, we may have lost that chance to become together as one. But what if we start right now? And so you do have Charles and Moira Mactaggert being able to kiss at the end of this book. You're kind of like, man, that is a great ending. But with that being said, this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. By our next one, we're going to jump into the Phalanx Covenants crossover. With that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.